Part 3 of The Ethical Engineer by Harry Harrison. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Reading by Greg Marguerite. Part 3 of The Ethical Engineer by Harry Harrison. Chapter 7. "Drink some more of this," the voice said, and cold water splashed on Jason's face, and some of it trickled down his throat, making him cough. Something hard was pressing into his back, and his wrists hurt. Memory seeped back slowly. The fight, the capture, and the potion that had been forced upon him. When he opened his eyes, he saw a flickering yellow lamp overhead, hung from a chain. He blinked at it and tried to gather enough energy to sit up. A familiar face swam in front of the light, and Jason squinted his eyes at it and groaned. "Is that you, Micah? Or are you just part of a nightmare?" "There is no escape from justice, Jason. It is I, and I have some grave questions to put to you." Jason groaned again. "You're real, all right. Even in a nightmare I wouldn't dare dream up any lines like that. But before the questions, how about telling me a thing or two about the local setup? You should know something, since you have been a slave of the Zertanoi longer than I." Jason realized that the pain in his wrists came from heavy iron shackles. A chain passed through them and was stapled to a thick wooden bar on which his head had been resting. "Why the chains, and what is the local hospitality like?" Micah resisted the invitation to impart any vital information and returned irresistibly to his own topic. "When I saw you last, you were a slave of Ch'aka, and tonight you were brought in with the other slaves of Ch'aka and chained to the bar while you were unconscious. There was an empty place next to mine, and I told them I would tend you if they placed you there, and they did. Now, there is something I must know. Before they stripped you, I saw that you were wearing the armor and helmet of Ch'aka. Where is the man? What happened to him?" "Me Ch'aka," Jason rasped, and burst out coughing from the dryness in his throat. He took a long drink of water from the bowl. "You sound very vindictive, Micah, you old fraud. Where is all the turn the other cheek stuff now? Don't tell me you could possibly hate the man just because he hit you on the head, fractured your skull, and sold you down the river as a slave reject. In case you have been brooding over this injustice, you can now be cheered, because the evil Ch'aka is no more. He is buried in the trackless wastes, and after all the applications were sifted out, I got the job." "You killed him?" "In a word, yes. And don't think that it was easy, since he had all the advantages and I possessed only my native ingenuity, which luckily proved to be enough. It was touch and go for a while, because when I tried to assassinate him in his sleep—" "You what?" Micah Salmon hissed. "Got to him at night. You don't think anyone in his right mind would tackle a monster like that face to face, do you? Though it ended up that way, since he had some neat gadgets for keeping track of people in the dark. Briefly, we fought, I won, I became Ch'aka, though my reign was neither long nor noble. I followed you as far as the desert, where I was neatly trapped by a shrewd old bird name of Edipon, who demoted me back to the ranks and took away all my slaves as well. Now that's my story, so tell me yours. Where are we? What goes on here?" "Assassin! Slaveholder!" Micah reared back as far as he could under the restraint of the chain, and pointed the finger of judgment at Jason. "2 more charges must be added to your roll of infamy. I sicken myself, Jason, that I could ever have felt sympathy for you and tried to help you. I will still help you, but only to stay alive, so that you may be taken back to Cassylia for trial and execution." "I like that example of fair and impartial justice. Trial and execution." Jason coughed again and drained the bowl of water. "Didn't you ever hear of presumed innocent until proven guilty? It only happens to be the mainstay of all jurisprudence. And how could you possibly justify trying me on Cassylia for actions that occurred on this planet, that aren't crimes here? That's like taking a cannibal away from his tribe and executing him for anthropophagy." "What would be wrong with that? The eating of human flesh is a crime so loathsome I shudder to think of it. Of course a man who does that must be executed." "If he slips in the back door and eats one of your relatives, you certainly have grounds for action. But not if he joins the rest of his jolly tribe for a good roast of enemy. Don't you see the obvious point here, that human conduct can only be judged in relation to its environment? Conduct is relative. The cannibal in his society is just as moral as the churchgoer in yours." "Blasphemer! A crime is a crime. There are moral laws that stand above all human society." "Oh, no, there are not. That's just the point where your medieval morality breaks down. All laws and ideas are historical and relative, not absolute. They are relevant to their particular time and place, and taken out of context they lose their importance. Within the context of this grubby society, I acted in a most straightforward and honest manner. I attempted to assassinate my master, which is the only way an ambitious boy can get ahead in this hard world, and which was undoubtedly the way Ch'aka himself got the job in the first place. Assassination didn't work, but combat did, and the results were the same. Once in power, I took good care of my slaves, though of course they didn't appreciate it, since they didn't want good care, they only wanted my job, that being the law of the land. The only thing I really did wrong was to not live up to my obligations as a slaveholder and keep them marching up and down the beaches forever. Instead, I came looking for you, and was trapped and broken back to slavery, where I belong, for pulling such a stupid trick." The door crashed open, and harsh sunlight streamed into the windowless building. "On your feet, slaves!" a Zertano shouted in through the opening. A chorus of shufflings and groans broke out as the men stirred to life. Jason could see now that he was one of 20 slaves shackled to the long bar, apparently the entire trunk of a good-sized tree. The man chained at the far end seemed to be a leader of sorts, because he cursed and goaded the others to life. When they were all standing, he snapped his commands in a hectoring tone of voice. Come on, first come best food. And don't forget your bowls. Put them away so they can't drop out. Remember, nothing to eat or drink all day unless you have a bowl. And let's work together today. Everyone pull his weight. That's the only way to do it. That goes for all you men, especially you new men. Give them a day's work here, and they give you a day's food." "Oh, shut up," someone shouted. "And you can't complain about that," the straw boss whined on, unperturbed. "Now, all together. 1. Bend down and get your hands around the bar and get a good grip. And 2. Lift it clear of the ground. That's the way. And 3. Stand up, and out the door we go." They shuffled out into the sunlight, and the cold wind of dawn bit through his Pyrran coverall and the remains of Ch'aka's leather trappings that Jason had been allowed to keep. His captors had torn off the claw-studded feet, but not bothered the wrappings underneath, so they hadn't found his boots. This was the only bright spot on an otherwise unlimited vista of blackest gloom. Jason tried to be thankful for small blessings, but only shivered some more. As soon as possible this situation had to be changed, since he had already served his term as slave on this backwoods planet and was cut out for better things. On order, the slaves lined up against the walls of the yard. Presenting their bowls like scruffy penitents, they accepted dippers of lukewarm soup from another slave who pushed along a wheeled tub of the stuff. He was chained to the tub. Jason's appetite vanished when he tasted the sludge. It was krenoj soup, and the desert tubers tasted even worse. He hadn't thought it was possible, when served up in a broth. But survival was more important than fastidiousness, so he gulped the evil stuff down. Breakfast over, they marched out the gate into another compound, and fascinated interest displaced all of Jason's concerns. In the center of the yard was a large capstan into which the first group of slaves were already fitting the end of their bar. Jason's group and the 2 others shuffled into position and seated their bars, making a 4-spoked wheel out of the capstan. An overseer shouted, and the slaves groaned and threw their weight against the bars until they shuddered and began to turn. Then, trudging slowly, they kept the wheel moving. Once this slogging labor was underway, Jason turned his attention to the crude mechanism that they were powering. A vertical shaft from the capstan turned a creaking wooden wheel that set a series of leather belts into motion. Some of them vanished through openings into a large stone building, while the strongest strap of all turned the rocker arm of what could only be a counterbalanced pump. This all seemed like a highly inefficient way to go about pumping water, since there certainly must be natural springs and lakes